What's up, Internet? My name is Will Glover, and I would like to welcome you guys to tonight's One Detroit anniversary show. It's a watch party here on Facebook, and we are going to be going over some cool clips with you guys tonight. You'll get to see what it is that we do and what we've done over this past year. And hopefully, if you guys are enjoying yourselves, you can feel free to ask us all sorts of questions that we can answer for you in the comment section below. But first, before we get into that, get into this and see what we are all about. Check it out.
Whatever happens in Detroit happens to all of us. The most exciting part for me about One Detroit is that we're going to focus on doing long-form, in-depth stories.
One Detroit will give us an opportunity to meet people in the neighborhoods and people that you should know.
There's a lot of interesting stories in this community that should be told, a lot of interesting people that should be spotlighted.
It's a type of journalism that we see a lot at the national level, but we don't get to see too much of locally, this kind of short-form documentary.
People are tired, they're scared, they're upset, they don't know where to go and what to do.
Housing, the environment, education, and giving more people a voice. We need to do more of those kind of stories that make people think, and we need to report on the solutions.
Our job isn't just to get the story. Our job is to build relationships that help us get to the facts of the matter.
Local news peddles in human tragedy, and that's something I don't need in my head. I just want to know what's going on with the average person and how it affects me.
People will spend the time watching if the stories matter to them, and I think that's what we're doing.
One Detroit is not always about making the stories I want to see. It's about reporting what's actually going on around us, in Detroit and the whole region.
And there aren't a lot of places where you're taking the time to be able to really concentrate on substance. I see One Detroit as a real evolution of that concept to an even broader vision.
So you've seen a little bit of what we are about here at One Detroit, and tonight we will be joined by my illustrious friend here. Robert, why don't you introduce yourself, tell them what you're all about.
Hey everybody, it's me, Mr. Robert. I'm the Island View liaison. I do a lot of stories on the Island View community on Detroit's east side.
And also here to field your questions, we have Christina here talking to you.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm the Digital Platforms Coordinator here at Detroit Public Television, and I will be here live to answer your questions about the segments that we are showing tonight.
So basically what we do is we go into communities and we talk to the people there to figure out what the actual story is, what's really going on, so that we get a better understanding. So we do that by going through neighborhood meetings, we have partnerships with local neighborhood organizations and all sorts of things like that. So this is a piece from Island View, where Robert is joining us from, that I did a while ago at the Church of the Messiah, and a few young men from that church invited us to talk to them and see what their life is like. So check it out.
You're doing stuff, you know, you trying to do the right thing, and bad stuff still happening, you know. Like, it'd be the equivalent of standing at, like, the bottom of a mountain, and everything you needed was at the top. You can't stay down here. And it's gonna be hard as hell getting up there, but you gotta do it.
I've never stayed in the house for a whole year, my whole life. Months, and then I'm moving with somebody else. I have no more grandmothers. They're gone. I have nowhere to go. My mom and dad, they're still together. They just got the kids sticking. I can't do nothing about it. Now I have 2 kids. I'm trying to figure out what I can do. He's the only one that's been blessing me and helping me and persevering. I don't have nothing. I'm just, I don't know, I'm very, very stressed out.
Like, I can be flipping some chicken, you know, working. Then you see everybody in the lobby just run outside. Then you go like, what's going on? You see somebody just get shot up at the gas station. And it was the only reason I'm working there because that's the only job I could find. And it was like, you know, ain't really no jobs in the city. So of course it's gonna be a job in like the roughest place. So, you know, I'm sticking it through there, but at the same time, I see so much stuff that it's changing my character and changing like my view of the world.
But it's clear these young men are acutely aware of their position in society. It's essential to navigating the realities of their daily lives.
Me personally, I don't really speak on what happens in the neighborhood, what happens in politics, school, or anything, or religion, because at the end of the day, what does it really have to do with me if y'all still not putting no real food in my mouth, no real job, no money in my pockets? I still got to get out here and strive and slave and do whatever I gotta do to make my next dollar, no matter if it's something legal or illegal, and that's sad.
The leaders, they're too out of touch. They don't really understand the real issues, and they're not proximate to the problems that people are really dealing with. And a lot of leaders don't want to be. And if you're not close to the problem, if you're not proximate to the issue that's going on, you're not really in a position to be able to change it or to really help and understand.
After our talk at the Church of Messiah, we spent a day with 24-year-old Dwight Roston. Today, he's making deliveries for Nikki's Ginger Tea, a company started in the basement of the Church of Messiah.
Not only does the general American's voice not matter because it's just billionaires versus everybody else now, but on top of that, I'm black. So everybody else who is excluded out of the whole billionaire club, they still look at me like, you know, you're not even in our club.
Right. Do you think that's part of the problem with like what the narrative of Detroit's comeback and all that type of stuff is?
It's not really inclusive. It's not even that, the whole gentrification thing, because I think that's just misunderstood. It's real, but you gotta look at it as what it is. It's not really people taking over, it's just people moving somewhere and building a bubble that only includes them.
So obviously it's a heavy conversation to be had, but one that needs to be heard. That was a population or a group of people that we very rarely get to hear from so candidly. And one thing that I want to make clear, these guys aren't destitute. They're not, completely downtrodden and out of it. They just allowed us a better look and more insight into what their lives are like and, what the world is like from their perspective. Robert, what did you think about that piece?
Well, to highlight on the perspective piece, I think more conversations like this need to happen. It helps to actually spur progress and policy to actually truly and significantly change their lives. So conversations like these are a start, but obviously more of what they have to say needs to be heard.
Right. And as always throughout the night, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the comments below. But Christina, who is talking to us on the internet?
Yeah, so we got a pretty good question, and it's, what do you think are good measures to take within the young male community to stop gun violence, because policy can only do so much?
Robert, what do you think about that?
Well, policy is of great importance, but there are a number of measures that can happen on the streets, but a lot of these gun violence issues stem from other issues that also need resolution, such as poverty being the main one and unemployment and things of those natures. So job opportunities need to be provided, training programs that actually lead to sustainable careers need to be provided because they have free time and they are using their free time to survive instead of thrive. So we need more opportunities.
Right, so basically we want to get to what the core issues of these things are that, elicit violence and the necessity to survive like that. But when it comes to violence, there is always an effort to stave that, and Robert here did a piece with us not too long ago about that specific subject, so let's take a look.
On the east side, in the Island View neighborhood, residents and the Church of the Messiah prepare for a march to end gun violence in Detroit called Silence the Violence.
Do marches work?
I think marches do work. They bring a lot of attention to different causes, but I feel like things need more than just a march. If you don't have any intent after the march to keep on planning, keep on organizing, it's gonna all go in vain. So I think there should be stuff that goes on after the march.
I can't help it. Murder is inconvenient.
With this particular march, things are changing a little bit, but take us back to the march being started initially.
Well, we started the march because I got tired of burying children. When I first became a priest, I'm thinking I'm going out to save the world. The first thing I started doing was burying children who were killed because of gun violence. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is not right. We have to do something about this. And a lot of times people think marches don't work and don't make a difference. But I always tell people, tell that to the mother whose son was killed in a drive-by. And a lot of times you will find out they want everybody to know that this was a person and that they lived and that they had hopes and dreams. So we stand up for that. That's why we provide opportunities as well as take it to the street to let everybody know they're not statistics.
On the last Saturday in June for the last 11 years, the Church of the Messiah has led the march to shed light on gun violence in urban communities. In its 12th year, the march is still necessary, shown this time with the recent loss of DeMarcus Washington.
One of the first young men I met was DeMarcus Washington, senior at Martin Luther King High School, was scheduled to graduate June 13th. And so he came, started working on a room, met him a couple times. We were having a meeting and he came and introduced himself. And now I believe that was on a Monday. That Friday he was murdered in a drive-by, not the intended target. So when John called to tell me what had happened, I told him, I said, John, reach out to the family. We'll have the funeral at Church of the Messiah. But one of the things that the Lord laid on my heart was because DeMarcus Washington was literally working to redevelop this room so that we could do it for job training for hundreds of Detroiters who would be getting jobs. Instead of naming it Church of the Messiah Empowerment Center, we named it the DeMarcus Washington Empowerment Center.
So that was Pastor Barry talking about the Silence the Violence March that happens annually. And Robert, that was something that you were very intertwined with. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yes, this year for the march was very significant and important because Pastor Barry was handing the reins over to Maya Jones, whose mission is to take it from just being an annual march to a movement with a number of activities scheduled throughout the year. So this coverage was more of a look at what has been happening and sort of a look at what's to come.
So to me, it's always good to see people doing these kinds of things and making sure that voices are heard and that people are aware of these kinds of issues and things like that going on, because if it wasn't happening, then who knows where we'd be. But right now, I want to know what you think about it. So Christina, what's the internet talking about?
Yeah, so we got a really good question in, and it says, well, obviously mass shootings are terrible. Do you think the conversation about gun control tends to focus on these incidents rather than the larger issue of gun violence in urban areas?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, personally, I think that, there's nothing wrong with common sense gun regulations, and the way in which we approach it, it bothers me because it touches everybody in different ways, and no matter how it shows itself, it's an issue. So I think that regardless of whatever the circumstances are, if we don't do something, then it's going to continue to be an issue. What do you think, Robert?
True. I mean, the conversation around gun violence is always with thoughts and prayers and never with actual actionable policies. And you can look at a number of countries and around the world, and it didn't take as many incidents as we've seen just this year alone for some tough policies to take place. So it's kind of disappointing.
Although it might be disappointing, things like Silence the Violence are what make it less so. So in order to uplift a community, there's other things we can do, like, I don't know, growing delicious and tasty foods, which is what's coming up in our next piece about hydroponics. Check it out.
Within the city of Detroit, there's a lot of viable space. So we're essentially taking what used to be manufacturing for the auto industry, and we're turning that into manufacturing of food.
I relate it very much to the same time when Henry Ford was bringing the first Fords off the assembly line. We're sort of at that point, that juncture in the hydroponic industry, in the way that we're innovating and birthing the industry here in the United States.
It was only when I came into this farm and saw how we were growing and how there's really only nutrients out into the water, no pesticide, no herbicide, that I understood that it is actually quite sustainable and is a good additive to the food system to supplement those other local growers that are growing that natural way in soil.
That's the Oregon peas, dwarf gray peas, and then the black oil sunflower seeds.
Starting my business pitch talking about hydroponic systems, I would have to qualify it and say that we are not growing weed, we are growing herbs, but not herb. We're growing vegetables and produce. And I know that from our standpoint, our lighting company was able to really grow its business from the cannabis industry, but that came back to help us launch our business growing produce because they had the money to develop these amazing lights that we now use to grow food to nourish the world. So how about that?
I know if you were like me the first time I heard hydroponics, I did not think vegetables right away. Robert, what was your first?
Nope.
No?
That's
But
not what I thought.
I think it's really good, and another reason that Detroit's an awesome place because that is a void that absolutely needs to be filled. There are not that many options for fresh vegetables and fruits like that when you're in the city. So what does that make you feel like when you see people doing these kinds of things?
Well, I always thought during an earlier part, when some people were leaving the city, that some of the vacant land around Detroit specifically was great places for urban farming. So it's nice to see some of those initiatives as people are coming to the city and as a level of Thrive is coming back, that these things are still going on. So
Right.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we could talk forever about this, but what does anyone else think on the internet? Yeah, give me some questions, Christina.
Yeah, well, there's so many urban farms popping up everywhere in Detroit and in other cities. Do you think that hydroponics will become a new normal in sustainable farming?
Honestly, I kind of hope so, because with all the vacant buildings and the open land in the city, I think that that would be an admirable way to use that, as opposed to just knocking it down and throwing up some other random stuff that maybe people can't afford or can't use. What do you think?
I agree, and it just brings another market to the city, to the area, to the state. For people who have different skill sets, this gives them an opportunity to learn a new trade, a new skill, and get involved in the marketplace, in the career field in a interesting and inventive way.
And you can brand it Detroit, and it'll sell all
over.
over, like Detroit broccoli, as it'll be
Probably
delicious.
not that.
Anyway, speaking of delicious things, something that is delicious for your ears is an artist by the name of Detroit Che. I got the chance to talk to her at Hello Records in Detroit. This girl is extra dope. She's doing really big things, and you are about to see why. Check it out.
My name is Detroit Che. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and this is my High 16.
Just give me a little bit about yourself and your background. Where'd you grow up, and just give me some details.
I grew up on the west side, Detroit, 7 Mile. I mess with the east side too, still all Detroit. I think my first performance, my mom would make me like rap, because like she knew I liked music, but I was still, like I said, still was doing basketball and stuff.
Move.
Exactly, like, come on baby, do your little dance. It's like, Mom, come on.
Not DJ Drama, I promise you I don't want any problems, but I've been crossed by this competition, logos on them pops. I've been fighting with mama, she wants me.
About what age would you say you started actually getting into music and looking at it as a serious path for your life?
I probably have to say like 2015, after the BT Hip Hop Award Cypher, is when I really was like, oh wow, like this is real. Like I can actually make a living, and not just make a living, but I can actually make an impact off of this.
I'm from Detroit, Michigan, home against the home of the Lions. My homies was dying, rock hoodies during moments of silence. Passionate, practicing, activists, dope with a shady capitalist.
Who's your ideal listener?
I think my music is for an audience of listeners who appreciates realism. If you're listening to my music and you can't like take away who this person is after listening to it, I don't feel accomplished as an artist. I mean, hip hop solely, it's reality, it's life.
I'm gonna read you a line from a song that you put out in 2014 and a line from a song that you recently put out. You them bricks ain't yours, that ain't yours.
Ooh, that's act like one.
To now, I could change the world if I stop drinking, if I start thinking.
Yes.
How do we get from 2014 to where we are today?
It was just necessary changes that I had to go through, just maturity, and I didn't want to use my platform in a diminishing way, I guess, to the listeners. And even still now, like I'm becoming more aware of my influence.
Tell me something about Che that most people wouldn't know or most people wouldn't suspect.
I guess the most intimate thing would be, just a constant battle with just depression. I've already exposed that side of me, however, but it's not a thing that just ended. It doesn't have like an ending period. It's still things that I'm going through as an artist. If that's something that I can tell people, it's like, the verses that I made years ago about depression and everything, those things still reside with me.
Because I still see no changes. I hated my ways, so I try to erase them with a gun to my head, but I ain't cold banging, and I'm
What
still
differentiates a Detroit artist from anybody else in the world?
I just think that, and this may sound cliche, but it's honest. I just think Detroit breeds a different type of just human being. Looking back on the examples that we had, looking back at Motown music. And now I'm not trying to compare and contrast or anything like that, but it's like, as an artist, if I'm not aware of my history, I don't know how to continue the Detroit legacy as a person or as an artist. Right. So I don't know, I feel like Detroit just breeds just a different type of hustle. Like I can go somewhere and people be like, you from the D? Yeah.
As you can see, Che hustles hard because she is from Detroit. And just so you guys know, you can find her on Instagram at Detroit Che. She told me earlier that at 9:30 she will be releasing a new verse. So that'll be something to look out for. What do you think about Detroit Che, Rob?
I just think she's a talented artist, and I love the way that her music has matured over time.
Oh yeah.
So I like to see that growth, especially in Detroit artists.
It's always fun when I get to like do things where I get to say terrible words and then go back and bleep them out. Like that's really fun for me. But what else is really fun is answering questions from the internet. What do you got, Christina?
Yeah, so a big thing is artists now try and keep it real, like keep it real. But a lot of times the message is still very negative, as we all know. Do you think that more musicians should go towards kind of doing a Detroit Che thing and bringing people up? Or do you think that the realness should stay like as it is?
The realness. I don't even really know what that means. I think if you're gonna be an artist, you're gonna be honest. That's really what the art is all about. So if it doesn't ring home and it sounds a little fake to certain people, then maybe it's just not for you. But that's just my opinion. What do you think, Rob?
Well, I get the point in the question that there are some artists who are about the moment right now. So whatever is of interest, whatever is the trend right now, that's what they're singing about, that's what they're rapping about. But there are a lot of artists, especially in old hip hop, who talked about things that were real in their life, real issues, real situations and circumstances people were going through. And it would be nice to find artists who got back to that part, because I think some of that is what listeners really enjoy.
Yeah, and some do. Some artists are really involved in, you know, social issues and things that are going on in their community, which is why this next clip is awesome, because it is a community meeting that we went to from Southwest Detroit. Now, this is an area that is experiencing a lot of development and a lot of growth, as well as a lot of difficulties for the people who are currently living there. Check it out.
Being a lifetime resident of Detroit, my family got to Corktown in the 1890s. And growing up, everything from the Lodge Freeway to River Rouge, from Jefferson to Warren, was Southwest Detroit. Corktown was still Corktown, but this is where all our families came from. This was the original immigrant neighborhood here in Corktown. Over the last 7 years or so, the Hispanic community has completely disappeared from this area. Southwest Detroit grew its own nonprofits, it grew its own business district, it grew everything out of necessity that nobody was coming in to save us. And now that we have built this beautiful community, we're being pushed out by development. This new Detroit isn't for everybody. We created this greatness, and now other people are profiting from it.
I also come from immigrant parents. My dad was Italian and my mother's Mexican, and they came in the early 1900s, landed in Southwest Detroit, and so I know Corktown very well because of my father's heritage, and I know Mexican Town very well because of my mother's heritage. I was born in the 48217 area, lived there for 40 years. I just came off of Rosa Park, and I didn't even know if I was turning right on Trumbull because of all that new development, and I'm here all the time. People don't want to say it's gentrification, you know, but it is gentrification. It's about a culture, not a race right now, because I have my white allies, residents in Corktown that are just as scared. You know, they're losing their piece of the pie too. And so now it's about the green. You know, it really is about classism versus racism. I mean, our neighborhoods are struggling.
There's this thing going on that we need to develop Detroit, and Detroiters have been developing all along.
So as you can see, there's a lot going on. When you have a neighborhood like that developing quickly, there's bound to be some friction. That's just natural. There are people who are already there. There are people who are bringing in new things that are changing. So Robert, this happened in Island View, and you guys in that neighborhood handled it a little different. There's a lot, it seems like there's a lot more cohesion, but that's just on the surface, so you tell me.
It is true cohesion, but I mean, Pastor Barry would tell you everything boils down to conversation. Once you get people to truly express their real feelings, you can find real change. And until we get to the point in these various communities that we really start talking about the issues, we might not as readily and quickly get to real solutions.
Right, and gentrification is a word that we hear a lot in the city of Detroit and around the country, frankly, because of, again, these core issues. There's poverty, there's lack of access to resources and all sorts of stuff. So we want to know what you think about gentrification and the development of the city. Christina, what are they saying?
Well, I guess gentrification comes down to a lot of people think it's nicer because more people from outside the city will come by, right?
Right.
Well, let's focus on the residents. With the residential change in all of these areas, how do you think it's going to impact them in the long run?
Well, I mean, of course things are going to change, but I think that if developers and neighborhood associations and block clubs and, you know, the city itself, if they make a concerted effort to make sure that people are heard and taken care of, then, I mean, it might soften the blow, but it's just a fact. If things are going to change, then some people are bound to be displaced. Robert, what do you think about that?
Some displacement is inevitable, but it is about the way it is communicated. Some people who have been forced out of the city by a number of different means didn't even get 30 days notice, and that's very short notice given the way our housing situation works, to find out that not only do you not have a place to go, but you don't have a place to currently live, but you might not have a place to go. So some people who are displaced don't really want to leave the city, so it becomes a scary situation to find that you are now on the outskirts of the city that you were born and raised in.
Right, which is kind of crazy, seeing as though the census is coming up in
Yes.
2020, which is going to be extravagantly important, because if we can keep people in the city and we can retain those bodies to count, then we get more, we get better representation, and overall life can get better, which is why this next clip about the census is so important.
The census actually is the one moment in time that we can count people to make certain that we have enough federal funding here in the state of Michigan to be able to provide those things. That's why it's so important for nonprofit organizations who depend on financing to be able to help them continue to do the work that they're doing. So it's a lot at stake in terms of not just dollars, but also making certain that we have good representation from the state of Michigan and in the federal government as well. And so we're really interested in making sure that we are able to leverage the trust that nonprofits have in community to make certain that people recognize the importance of being counted, mattering, and being able to make a difference in the communities where they live.
You know, you just said something really interesting. You said leverage the trust. And I think that sometimes that's where we're seeing a breakdown of people in the community that don't quite trust the process and the counting process and what that will mean for communities. Hassan, what are some of the challenges that you're hearing from people about concern about being counted or not being counted?
And the trust is a key issue here. And knowing the process, knowing why this has been done and how it benefits communities and people, especially in an age where privacy is now a major concern for everyone. There are also the fact that this citizenship question was added last minute in an political environment where immigrants are feeling being targeted, and they're very significant a group to be included in the census. So privacy, moving to internet census this year or in 2020, the fact that there are these citizenship question and what it means to immigrant communities.
And there's real concern there.
And there are real concerns about this. We could lose a significant populations in account if we don't address this issue. So we do have challenges. That the task for us is to be transparent, honest, trusting in terms of how we communicate these challenges and how we as a community can come together and do the job of complete count. This is critical for us. 40% of state budget is federal money based on the census numbers.
So as you can see, the census is very important to me. I mean, honestly, it's like just a really big attendance taking.
Gigantic
Like if you had
attendance,
a
yes.
homeroom with everybody in your city,
Present.
that's what the census is. But one of the things that to me is paramount about the census is not only just getting the count right, but the fact that there's seems to be concerted effort to discourage certain people from taking the census.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've heard about?
Oh, definitely. Communities of color are expressing in a number of different ways their trepidation as it comes to the census process and how fair it's going to be, how equitable it's going to be. Will they actually and truly be counted, or is this just another measure for some communities that are in danger of deportation, just finding you and getting rid of you?
Right, and
So-
it's kind of sad because it's already hard enough to get people to do anything.
True.
Much less fill out a survey or answer questions on a phone.
Right.
And any more effort to stop people from doing that, I think, is kind of ridiculous. But let's see what the internet has to say about it. Christina, what are they saying?
Yeah, so we got 2 comments on this one.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first one is with like all of the change that we're having in the political climate, and like you said, with the whole deportation and people getting scared that they're going to be taken away, do you think the census is a good or bad thing in this time of political climate that we're in?
I mean, there's no political climate that is going to make certain things unnecessary or good or bad. Simply knowing how many people are in a place is neither good nor bad. That's simply just knowledge and data. The thing is, we decide how we allocate our funds based on that, and how it dictates people's quality of life. So it's always a good thing to have the census, because we always are going to need to know where people are so that we can form ideals as to how to better help them. What do you think about that question?
I agree with that. I support inventory. I'd like to know. It's such a mechanical
Like I
term,
said.
but I support.
Dale from Topeka, are you here? Okay, we
Just
got Dale.
knowing what we have, how many people are here. So when it comes back down to, like you were saying, allocation of resources, you know, this particular area needs more because they have more.
Right. Well, when it comes to having a bunch of people all in the same place, all to be counted up by a census, naturally, we're humans. True. We clash a little bit. We disagree. I think I'm handsome. He doesn't agree, but that's a whole other thing. But we still sit here next to each other and remain civil, like this next piece. Check it out.
And, you know, what we're really trying to get at is the polarization of America, the division in America that we all talk about, that we all see around us.
It got to the point where I had to unfollow her on Facebook. I wish I could have handled that differently. Why was I so willing to discard my friend? Because her beliefs were different.
Margaret Allen is talking with her conversation partner, Amy Hennis, as part of the Civility Project. Allen helps returning citizens, but on social media, she'd learned her best friend living in Grand Rapids had a change of political heart.
We've talked about it more recently, and she has said, if you loved and respected me, you should have just at least heard me out. And I didn't. I wasn't willing to, because the premise was offensive. You like Republicans? Oh, no. I think over the years I've learned that people understand what they know, but we're so emotional about it that we don't take the time to get to know what they know or to try and understand where they're coming from, because a different opinion doesn't make a person a bad person. But I still had that instinctive response to Nolan Finley, so I'm like, maybe I can benefit from this.
So when it comes to civility, I have my own thoughts. I genuinely think, yes, it is good to be civil when you're having discourse about things and you're going to learn new information and new perspectives from people. But at the same time, there are times when civility isn't necessarily the right way to go. And again, this is my opinion, because I think that there are times and situations where there is no more time to be civil.
Right.
You know, like when you're hungry, being civil isn't really
Not going to get you fed.
Right,
No.
it's not going to feed your belly. If you don't have a place to stay, being civil isn't really going to get you anything. But that's just what I feel. What do you think about this project?
I mean, I think the civil rights movement was a good indicator of just how different people can be. There are those who will truly and naturally operate out of peace, and there are those who will shake a table if necessary. And I think it's important to recognize that sometimes there is overlap where both groups, up until a point, are about the same thing, and then for others, they will turn the other cheek, and then for others, they will not turn the other cheek.
And thus, civility may or may not ensue. But let's see how civil you're being on the internet. Christina, what do you have for us?
Yeah, well, first off, a lot of people are saying hello.
Hi.
And
What's up?
a lot of people are just very happy to be here, honestly.
Oh my God, you guys.
A lot of, like, just want to say hi, you know.
Hi.
So,
hi, Mom.
but yeah, along the lines of civility, I would say, like, how do you think that cancel culture is affecting the civility in this day and age? And going back to the census too, if it comes up short, like we can lose federal funding to our states and cities. And do you think that civility goes along with that?
Well, when it comes to cancel culture, I hope I didn't just cancel Robert by saying he doesn't think I'm handsome, because
I feel like you did, and I have
he
to
is
apologize.
entitled to his own wrong opinions.
Can I take this
which
moment
is all
now?
I'm saying.
Sorry.
No, I mean, when it comes to cancel culture, yes, there are limits to everything, and also there's a learning curve. People, not everybody's going to know everything exactly when they need to know it. I think we need to always allow for room to grow and for people to learn, but I don't think it's bad that people are held to account. Is that out of bounds?
I don't think it's out of bounds. I think it is fair, but there is a period where things that were acceptable to us in the 90s might not necessarily be acceptable to us at this point. So there is room for people to grow. I think we do need to accept a genuine and honest apology when we have received it. I don't know what is expected sometimes from cancel culture. It seems like people have to apologize every day, every month, every year. At what point do we forgive them and truly accept that they have learned from this and moved on?
All right, Christina, you're on the web all the time. What do you think about cancel culture?
I think cancel culture is a little overdone, kind of honestly, because I think it's going back to civility. When people just don't agree with anyone, they immediately going to just writing them off. Like, you don't agree with me, I'm gonna unfriend you. And I think that's just
You're
a little,
canceled.
It's a little extreme.
And I'm gonna take your job.
Oh man.
Well, you're canceled and your money's mine
you
too.
have no money.
I know, right? It's just I do think it's just a little too much.
And back to the question about, what was it, the census?
Yeah, about could we actually lose representation in Congress if our census count, I can talk tonight, comes up short? I know we can lose federal funding to our states and cities.
That I'm not totally sure on, but there is a lot at stake. So regardless of whether or not it's representation or dollars allocated, we need to make sure that as many people are counted as possible. But thank you for counting with us all of these clips that we've shared over an entire year. It's been wonderfully fun for me. We picked up Robert along the way, and hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more of him. I would like to thank a couple people before we leave. Nakia and Colleen and Zach, who is our crew here helping us out that you guys can't see, are doing an awesome job. And also, just so you guys don't forget, keep up with One Detroit on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just search for One Detroit. And if you want to see tonight's actual main show, stick around a little bit on this feed. I think they'll be playing it at around 9 o'clock. And we'll see you next time. Maybe we'll see you in the city. Peace.